Yes, this means being recorded so we can the people that couldn't make it today can watch it in the future. If you can you please scan this QR code just so we can let you know that we're here and that you're here and everything. I'll give you a few minutes to scan and fill out the form. And then, so now we're gonna move on to our tech person of the week.
Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but I also just sent the link to the registration for just the bit.ly in the chat too, so you can take a look at it after.
And now we have our tech person of the week.
All right, I'm presenting the tech person of the week. So just to kind of explain what tech person of the week is, it's a segment that we have at our meetings every week where we choose to highlight a person in tech that isn't really highlighted that much. So the person I chose is Kimberly Bryant. She is the founder of Black Girls Code. The reason, the first time she ever thought about starting it was because her daughter came to her and she was like, hey, I'm interested in computer science. What option is there for me to learn that outside of school? So all the courses that she looked at only had men. Most of the classes were filled with men, and there were barely any other women of color if there were any women. So from then on, she started Black Girls Code, which is has become an international organization now. It started with very little people and now has up to 3,000 students and is still growing. That just encourages Black girls and girls of color to get into the tech field and gives them that space to move forward in a field that's not really the courses weren't suited for them. So this created a course that was well suited for people of color, especially little girls of color.
Yeah. And now we have some people from HubSpot here. We have Glory, and then she's gonna, if you can share your screen.
Yeah. Actually, so we also have an engineer here, Mukul, and he's gonna kick it off and share his screen first, and then we'll jump into my thing at the end. Okay.
Cool.
All right, let me attempt to share this. So I have purchased recently one of those humongous 34-inch widescreen monitors, and this is the first time I'm sharing via Zoom on that. So
we love that.
Something may go wrong.
Yeah.
So let's see if this works.
I would love one of those monitors. I'm really jealous.
Nice. Nothing went wrong, I don't think. Unless you didn't mean to do this. Okay, perfect.
Okay, can you guys see this? It doesn't look weirdly distorted or anything like that?
Yeah, I see it.
Okay, cool. All right. So as Glory said, I am one of the engineers at HubSpot. And I was told that you guys wanted to know a little bit more about sort of, tips on starting your career, maybe finding internships and jobs, what it would be, what kinds of projects look good, and just general advice on that kind of stuff. And how do you manage your career once you sort of first start off at your new job. Does that sound good? Is that kind of what you guys were looking for? I know also some of you, I think Glory said that I work on machine learning at HubSpot. So some of you were interested in what exactly is that? What exactly is that? So I'll talk a little bit about that. Sounds good. I realize I'm not in a room with you guys, so I didn't really think this through. But how many of you guys are freshman, junior, senior? How does that distribution come? Are most of you guys early freshmen, sophomores, or what does that look like? I don't know how you guys are gonna respond.
You could do, I've come to realize the power of Zoom with reactions. You could be if you're a first year, do the clapping.
Yeah, I'm a first
reaction.
year, so yeah.
Cool. Are most of you CS students?
Yep.
Yeah, I'm CS and game dev.
Okay, cool. So let me sort of jump right into it. I'm gonna keep it pretty short, and I want to make sure that you guys have time for questions at the end, because I think that's where like you guys can ask me specific things. So the agenda is really short, 4 things. I'm just going to briefly talk about what HubSpot is, a little bit about me, tips on starting your career, and then like I said, a lot of time at the end for questions. So what is HubSpot? I know HubSpot does like a lot of like on-campus presence at Northeastern, so I'm sure you guys have probably heard about us. But like, what do? We are a software as a service company, and we're an all-in-one like marketing, sales, and service software. So what that means is if you were to go out and start, a small business for yourself, let's say you guys went to a hackathon, you built something really cool, you built a startup, now you want to know how to like manage your, do the marketing, sales, and all that process. So that entire, stuff can be quite cumbersome to do, but HubSpot offers like one platform to let you manage all of that content and all of that information. So it's a pretty huge product, and it's very interesting to work on because there's just so many different moving bits. And sort of like the general mission of the company is to help basically millions grow better, millions of businesses grow better. The concept of that is just sort of, we sort of invented this concept of inbound marketing, which is sort of, prior to HubSpot being around, a lot of marketing used to be sort of like spammy phone calls, spam email, and just sort of like shoot everywhere and see what hits, see what sticks. HubSpot has always been sort of about like, let's meet the customers where they want to be met. So that would be through like blogs, attracting people to your website organically and stuff like that. And that's all I'm going to say about what HubSpot is. And feel free to stop me if you guys have any questions. So starting your career. A little bit about me first, though. My name is Mukul, as I said, and I'm a senior modeler at HubSpot. And I've been here for a little bit more than 3 years. So I started in July of 2017. And I graduated from RPI in 2017, too. So the first question is that most people have when I sort of like give a talk is like, what does your title mean? Like, what is a senior modeler? I kind of gave it away at the beginning, but I work on machine learning at HubSpot. And the way machine learning at HubSpot is split up is that we have multiple teams. And in the industry, you might often hear the term machine learning engineer. And that term is very broad because it could mean that someone works on the infrastructure side of things. So that would be getting the data, formatting the data in the correct manner. It could also mean that this same person also builds the models. So they do all the research, they do all the maths and all that kind of stuff. And this same person could also be responsible for deploying that model into production, right? But if you read between the lines, those are like 3 distinct steps. And at HubSpot, we have split those out into 3 different sort of sub teams per se. And so what I work on specifically is the modeling portion. So what most people think about when they think about machine learning, that is precisely what I do. So my job is sort of like split 50-50 between research and application. And like, this is just a few of the numbers that we have. I know it's not a talk on machine learning at HubSpot, but it's just like a little bit of bragging rights. We have like over 40 different machine learning models in production that are split across the product. A lot of these are things like our sort of like ethos on building these is, you wouldn't really notice it if you were to switch to another product. If you went somewhere else, you would be like, oh wait, all these like little things aren't here. It's kind of like switching from Spotify to Apple Music. You might realize after using Spotify for like several years that it has like curated content for you, and it's really become really good at your own deciding your taste. And then you switch to something else and like everything is much harder to do. So we do like 2 billion inferences on a daily basis. Inferences are like predictions. So you like ask for an output from the model. We have about 2 billion of these a day, which is pretty crazy, like a volume. And our group is about 24 people and growing. We're always looking to hire great people. And again, we have like dozens of different product teams within HubSpot using a lot of our infrastructure and the things that we've built. So I wanted to talk a little bit about what I've worked on. Now this part is a little bit difficult to explain because there's no like actual pictures associated with what I've worked on, so it's more or less just text and me explaining what it is. But I wanted to get a sense before I started talking. Have any of you taken a course on machine learning? Have heard about the term? Just like anything, like feel free to just like say something or like type something in the chat to say like yes, no.
No.
No, no, okay. I will take that as a no for everyone. So I'll explain from the beginning. Let me just give a very, very, very brief overview of machine learning. It's effectively just a method of reaching artificial intelligence. If you imagine artificial intelligence as a circle, machine learning would be a circle within that circle. So it's like a way to achieve artificial intelligence, but it's not the only way. So the basic premise is you have some data. You want to learn from that data to predict on new data. So let's say you had data about Boston housing prices, and you knew things like the square footage of a house, you knew where it was located, how many bedrooms it had. You have a bunch of data about this for different houses and in Boston. You would take that data, you would, put it into some machine learning model or algorithm, right? And then it would learn from that data so that given a new house, you could estimate its price. You could basically predict it, saying, I've seen all this information beforehand, and I know what the prices of these houses were. What would be the price of this new house that I just am asking for? So that's like a very simple thing. It's just, it's basically just learning to approximate a function. The idea is that there's a function for how dogs walk. There's a function for what the difference between a cat and a dog is. There's a function for, basically a car to be able to drive itself. Machine learning is just a way of approximating that function given a whole bunch of data. So some of the projects that I've worked on are an ML question and answering system. So users in our product can ask for, they'll file tickets saying like, hey, something's wrong, I don't know how to do this. And that often goes to a service representative who will then try to help them. But sometimes these things are pretty simple. So I built a system that reads understands the text that the person has typed in, understands their meaning, and tries to then recommend one of the articles that we already have written out to help them with their problem. Another thing is more research oriented. This is a concept of like, machine learning models typically require a lot of data to train, but that data can be quite redundant. So how do you build a better model with less data? This was more of like a research research project that I worked on. We actually have a blog post about this. So if you head over to the HubSpot engineering blog, you can read all about this. Another one was kind of like, this is easier to grasp, sort of like search result ranking within HubSpot. You can search for things and we can, it's basically like Google. You can either search based on meaning or you can search based on like literally what you typed in. And we found that a lot of people like now want to search based on meaning. So that's a whole different type of ballgame. Another thing is this is sort of, I realize this might be a bit complicated to explain, but A/B testing. So let's say you're running an ad campaign and you want to know which color button worked better, red or blue. There is a very easy way of doing it, which is to show red to half of your customers and blue to the other half and decide at some point that this is it. Or you can do it smarter in our sense, where we have like a bunch of neural networks that continuously optimize which button to show, such that you are basically always showing the best possible thing. And the last one is sort of like abuse detection. So, trying to detect bad actors within our product. People that upload email lists that have a bunch of fake emails, and customers might try to send to them, and those result in email bounces, and that hurts our reputation. So how do you detect this kind of stuff? Yeah, so this is just sort of like some of the projects I've worked on. I'm happy to go into more detail about any of these, but I kind of want to keep it short.
I think there's a question. What languages or frameworks do you use for machine learning?
Yeah, where did this chat go? chat. There we go. Cool. The languages that we use are Python. That's if you want to do machine learning in real life, use Python. Don't use anything else. At the current moment, there's two frameworks that you can use. You can either use TensorFlow or PyTorch. I personally use TensorFlow, but if you want to get started really quickly, use TensorFlow. If you're into research and you want to like go super heavy, use PyTorch. So how did I basically end up at HubSpot? As I said, I went to RPI, and then after my freshman year, I interned at Monster.com, not the energy drink, but the job website. Then after my sophomore year, I interned at National Instruments. They basically build equipment for engineers, so basically being able to simulate PCBs on software. And then after that, I went to Onshape, which was a startup in Cambridge that basically is Google Docs meets AutoCAD. So you can do 3D modeling and design in the cloud. And then after that, I ended up at HubSpot. So it was quite a journey. Along the way, there are 3 different internships, each one at a different size companies, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. So sort of tips on getting the job, right? This is sort of very high level things. But the very first one, and very obvious one, is actually pay really close attention in your data structures and algorithms classes. I think this is something that like people weirdly tend to overlook, but if you want to actually get the job, you will be asked a coding interview question or two. And people, this is the way the industry seems to have gone, is that it's become sort of like this brain teaser question type of thing. And it doesn't necessarily, like, it's not exactly what you would be doing at work, but it tests the way you think. And so the 2 courses that are like the most important to pay attention to are these 2 courses, because pretty much everything required to solve those questions will be taught to you in those 2 courses. And if you want to get a taste of what the problems might look like, you can go to LeetCode, which some of you may have heard. It's kind of like a thing where like everyone just grinds out on LeetCode questions and eventually sort of like gets really good at these. This is just like incredibly practical advice. I would follow this. Getting a little bit more high level, start early with your search for internships and co-ops. I think a lot of people have this misconception that you want to, you're only qualified for an internship or a co-op after maybe your junior year is done. But I would recommend like actually going to every single career fair and like just trying. You learn a lot in each one. You get better at interacting with people. You see what's out there, and if you're lucky, you'll get an internship after your freshman year. The thing in CS is I think a lot of people, you can learn a lot on your own, and I think it's easier to get an internship after your freshman and sophomore year, and if you're computer science, gaming sort of like major, than it is if you're maybe like an aerospace engineer or something. But a lot of people, like, I've seen it from my friends included, like they disqualify themselves from going to career fairs because they're like, oh, I don't have enough experience, right? That transitions nicely because like what do you do when it actually doesn't transition nicely? It's after this slide. But so once you have the opportunity to sort of like get your feet wet and you're trying to pick like what should I do, right? You want to take into account that you want to explore different types of companies. Like I said, I had the opportunity to intern at 3 different places before I ended up at HubSpot, and each one was unique in itself. The first company, Monster.com, was really huge. It was a big web company. Their tech stack was primarily like C# and stuff like that. And it was like a huge 2000s .com company. And, I worked there and I worked on interesting things, but I realized that I didn't want to work for a massive company. And I didn't particularly like C#. And so the next company I chose to intern at was National Instruments. And this was, the complete opposite of HubSpot in the sense that their tech stack was very different. It was all like hardware, so like embedded programming and writing in C++. Again, I didn't know if this is what I enjoyed, but I wanted to try that out. And I love the company culture, and I sort of like, I enjoyed living in Austin for a while. That's another great thing, is with your internships and stuff, you get to kind of like go to different places in the country, and you kind of get to see what it would be like to live there for a while. And I realized after doing an internship there, like, while I had a great time, I don't particularly want to do C++ or embedded hardware sort of programming things. I just wasn't my thing. So after that, I interned at Onshape, which was a startup in Cambridge. And this was like literally 70 people. And their layout was basically an L shape. So you could see everyone. So basically by the end of the internship, I knew every single person there, including the people that worked in sales and marketing, all the way, up to the CEO, because he was like right there. And so this was a very different vibe. And this was a very modern tech stack. They worked exactly with like what HubSpot works on. And I just really enjoyed that environment. And so I learned that I wanted to work with smaller companies. And so HubSpot ended up being sort of this place that I joined that had kind of like the perfect mesh of all these values, because it felt like a really well-funded startup that was already public, but teams were small and autonomous, and it didn't feel like a huge company, but had all the benefits of being a huge company. So the next thing is working on side projects that you actually find interesting, right? A lot of people get confused about, how do I select side projects? And one of the things is there isn't, so it's just, can you talk about it? It doesn't matter like what the actual project is. Can you talk about it in detail? Can you explain, why you chose to do this project? What about it was interesting? And if someone were to ask you technical questions on it, like, can you go in detail? What you don't want to do is just follow some tutorial on the internet on how to build like a to-do list app, and then just do that and then call that as a project that was done, right? You want to make sure that you can really dive in deep and sort of have a reason for wanting to pursue it. I can answer more specific questions if you want later on. And the last thing is, this is just my personal advice, like really go to hackathons. Hackathons are fantastic. You get free food, you get to meet new people, you get to work on fun projects, the types of projects that turn out to be interesting projects to explain to other engineers. You learn new skills and you win prizes. There's a couple of my friends and I, we went to we were selected to go to a hackathon at Facebook, and we carried around this huge check at the airport because we couldn't check it in as luggage. And you'll be surprised, we got a lot of questions from people. But yeah, you get nice prizes if you do well. That was $5,000, which was quite nice. So I realized I think I'm going over a bit. Glory, am I like over on time quite a lot?
No, I think we have till 7, so
okay.
You can keep going, and I'll just talk really fast in my section.
Okay. So once you got the job, really want to get to know your team. These are people that you're going to be spending quite a lot of time with. They're usually people that are like quite cool, because if you're awesome, you ended up at this company, likely the same qualities are what other people have. So take time to get to know them. What you can do is you can, basically establish relationships with people within the company. Try to find a mentor or someone to connect with. This can be like a senior engineer or anyone that you can just kind of go and ask questions to. It doesn't even have to be on your own team. You can do this by just like going to different company events and meeting people. Try to add to the culture. Each company is going to have a unique culture. At HubSpot, we really emphasize culture, and we have all sorts of like cool events like board game nights and things like that. So, definitely don't just like sort of come to work to come to work. Sort of come to work and then like enjoy all the other benefits that the company will offer. The thing that I can emphasize the most is like, when you start off in your career, ask for feedback early on quite a bit. You kind of want to have like this feedback cycle where if you want to be consistently improving, and the only way to improve is to know where you're wrong. And so you want to ask feedback from people, and you want to work in an organization that actually sort of emphasizes the importance of feedback. So that's a question that you can ask, or something that you can kind of like seek to vet out when you're applying to different places. And sort of like a little bit of miscellaneous stuff that I noticed was, especially if you're an engineer, when you go into meetings and places, keep track of terms and concepts that are mentioned that you don't understand. bring a pen and a paper, or like track it down on your notepad or something within your computer, and create like a personal wiki for yourself. You know, you don't want to just let these things slide by, because eventually you'll build yourself on a shaky foundation. And the other thing is, like, ask questions if you don't know something. Don't ever pretend like you know something, because eventually you will have to explain to somebody else, or you know, it will come a time where you really have to know it, and people will find out you didn't understand, you didn't know what you're talking about, or you didn't know this particular concept. No one expects you to know everything, but people don't want to work with know-it-alls. Everyone wants to work with like a learn-it-all. So you know, try to be that. And that's pretty much it. Thank you. And I'm open to questions or anything you guys may want.
There's one question from the chat. What was your experience with code review like at different companies?
Sure. When I interned at Monster, the code reviews were very, so I ended up working on like a very niche project. So I basically didn't even have a code review. It was just like one tool that I ran, that I built. So that's all I can say about that. I didn't have a code review there. When I interned at National Instruments, the code reviews were very intense, because it was like being shipped on a physical hardware device. The thing that I worked on actually somehow ended up on a SpaceX rocket a couple like years later, which I didn't know. But they were very nitpicky, and basically people got into a room and the code was projected on the wall, and you basically explained what it was doing and why you'd made these decision choices. It's kind of like a presentation, and it was very intense. I did not particularly enjoy it. I will say that. But I think if your code is going to run on a rocket, something like that needs to be, that level of rigor probably needs to be there. And then when I interned at the startup, it was a lot like HubSpot, where we just submitted things to GitHub and had PR reviews. And you know, there were small PRs, not huge chunks of code being submitted, and you got timely feedback, and basically you just shipped, and it was a lot nicer. Okay. Another question that I had was, can you talk about a personal project you did? Maybe my favorite one. Yes. So the hackathon that I went to, that I did at Facebook with my friends, we basically built a system that would, a Google Chrome extension that would allow you to search within any video on YouTube. So imagine you're watching a video on, you're watching a lecture, and you wanted to know when the professor talks about something. You could type in our little extension, like when the professor says this, and it'll highlight within the video whenever that happens. Or you could talk about like someone doing something, like a dog running, and it will find that in the video. So that was a project that turned out, that was a hackathon project that we then deployed to like a full production system that you could actually use. In the process of doing that, it was my favorite one, because one, we won the hackathon. Two, because it gave me great experience into like system design, because all of this was built to actually scale and run. And three, we actually tried to turn it into a startup, but didn't quite succeed, but it was still a fun experience. So you'll never know where you'll end up with a small project. Let's see. How did you figure out that machine learning was the area that you wanted to pursue? Did you know that during school? It's a long story, but the short answer is I applied to school as a physics major, realized the only way out was through a PhD, and that's not what I wanted to do. So I had been doing computer science stuff for fun all the time. So I switched to CS. I didn't particularly enjoy a lot of the sort of like building web applications and stuff like that. I realized I liked a lot of like theory heavy things. And so I ended up sitting on a lecture on machine learning and realized like, oh, this is exactly what I was interested in. It was a blend of mathematics and like actual application. So here you can do a whole bunch of math and theory, and it actually applies to something in real life that you can build right now and deliver value. And that's basically how I knew. So yeah, I didn't know that. I didn't even know what machine learning was going into school. Didn't know it existed. Didn't know it was a thing in CS. I found out my junior year. What is your favorite thing about HubSpot? Why should someone apply to work there? It's going to sound incredibly corny to people. there is a tremendous amount of autonomy at HubSpot. Of all the companies that I've interned and worked at, HubSpot is like, it's astounding as to how much responsibility you get early on in your career. And that allows you to have a lot of growth potential. And people really trust you to take ownership over the projects that you have. And that obviously is a lot of satisfaction that you have, but it allows you to grow a lot. And yeah, that is the reason why. And then the people, everyone there is just super sort of caring, and people are invested in your actual growth. You're not seen as sort of like another engineer or cog in a wheel. People from the top down are invested in making sure that you're actually able to achieve your personal goals as well as like your professional goals. Cool.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you. And I think I'll go ahead and jump in. And I think Mukul, you can go ahead and log off. If you want to head out, totally up to you. And I'm just going to be talking about DIMB and doing a workshop, literally nothing technical. So feel free to head out if you want to. And yeah, let me go ahead and share my screen here. Uh-oh. Well,
is it letting you share your screen?
It is not. Let me see if I can figure out why that's happening. Oh, popped up. Okay, cool. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about DIMB, which stands for Diversity, Inclusion, and Belonging. But I guess, okay, first off, I'll introduce myself. So my name is Glory Montez. I'm a campus technical recruiter here at HubSpot. I've been here for about 2 years now, and I'm actually a Northeastern alumni myself. I graduated in 2016, which is no longer last year, which is too much for me. So I'll pretend it was last year. And then in terms of, my own experiences with DIMB, I guess I just wanted to start off by saying, like, why is this important to me? Why is this something I care about, right? So I'm Puerto Rican. I was born in Puerto Rico. I moved here when I was like 5 years old. I moved to New Jersey. Then when I was like 10 years old, I moved back to Puerto Rico. Then when I was like 15 years old, I moved back to New Jersey. So I've sort of been going back and forth between New Jersey and Puerto Rico my whole life. Obviously, my whole family is Puerto Rican. It's my culture and like my heritage. And to be totally honest, I think something I sort of fell into early in my career was I didn't really think about like why DIMB was so important to me. Like, I think especially because, and this is something I've given a lot of thought to, especially lately when I think about Black Lives Matter and we talk about these things. I'm light-skinned and I can be white passing. So like, I'm somebody who like, sometimes people can't tell I'm a person of color. And because of that, sometimes it takes me a little bit longer to think about, like, at least early in my career, it wasn't immediately as apparent to me why it was so important until I remember I was working at this one company and I was sitting in this boardroom with like 30-ish people at the time. And I think somehow like people were talking about like last names and, oh, how do some people have 2 last names? And someone made a joke like, that's so weird. People are so weird who have 2 last names. And people laughed. And I was sitting there like, oh, I have 2 last names because I'm Puerto Rican and that's a Hispanic heritage thing. And then I sort of had this sudden moment of like, I think I'm the only person of color in this room right now. And then I was like, oh my God, how can I not have like seen this before? And then all of a sudden, everywhere I went in this company, I was like, why are there no people of color here? I would be like, where are they? Why aren't they here? And it was the moment for me where I was just like, I don't want to be in that situation again where I feel weird, you know? So yeah, that was like a big change for me personally. And ever since that moment, it's become like one of my biggest priorities when I think about where I'm going to work. So that's really how it's changed over time. And obviously that's very privileged of me to have just realized like so late in the process, like that I was the only person of color in that room. But I think it was like an important moment in my own career. So yeah, I have a video of Brian Halligan, our CEO at HubSpot, talking about DIMB, but I think we have like 15 minutes left, so I'm going to skip it for now, so we can just get right into like the conversations. But it's essentially him talking about like, why is it important for corporations to get involved in DIMB? And the answer is, I think more than ever, corporations are groups of people, right? And made up of people from different backgrounds. And they're not just like, and that's why it's important that like people can feel represented in these corporations. And I think it makes a big, you know, statement, especially when a corporation is able to say, hey, we at the senior leadership level think about DIMB and we think it's really important and it's a priority. And I think that type of commitment from the top up can really trickle down. And, you know, that was actually something that's important to me when I think about like, how do companies commit to DIMB is there buy-in from senior leadership? And I actually remember this. So I did my master's in human resources management, and one of the classes I took was about DIMB, like so diversity and inclusion in the workplace. And I remember the professor had us pick like our favorite company, like a company that we really looked up to. And then he was like, okay, now I want you to do a project where you try and find all of these things through their website. So can you find their their D&I report, like they're reporting on diversity and inclusion in their company? Can you find who the head of diversity and inclusion is in the company? Can you find a quote from the CEO of that company saying that they care about diversity and inclusion? And yeah, it was kind of a bloodbath. Like this company that I had looked up to, all of the links in like their diversity and inclusion page were broken, and their D&I report was from 2016. And I was like, wait, have you guys like not done a report since 2016? Or like, have you guys not taken the time to update it? And it was really an awesome moment, I think, because I was like, wow. And like, this is a company that I look up to, and is like a large company with money. Like they should be able to like get their websites working. And I think that was like a big moment for me personally as well. So yeah, I think these are some of the things we do at HubSpot in terms of DIMB, and some of the things that I've really appreciated personally. And yeah, let me see. Oh, also employee resource groups. So a lot of companies will have groups like this, but I definitely suggest you look into it as well. I'm part of the POCA group at HubSpot, which is People of Color at HubSpot. But we also have a Woman at HubSpot club. They're called employee resource groups, but we kind of treat them like clubs. Like we have club meetings and we share links and stuff. Like we have a Slack channel, so we share links and We like congratulate each other if somebody gets a promotion or something. It's pretty fun. And we also do events, like especially POCA. I've been to so many cool POCA events where they'll bring in like guest speakers who are like CEOs or chefs or just talking about their experiences in like their specific industries and what it's like being a person of color or or a woman or whatever else in their own industry, and how that's sort of adding their own perspective to what struggles or challenges they had, and also what things they were able to sort of bring to the table. So yeah, these are a few of our employee resource groups. And now let's get to the exercise part of it. So actual interaction, we can chat a bit. So I would say maybe if you guys can have like 2 or 3 minutes to look over these questions and think about the answers. So maybe let's start with, you know, what values are important to you in a company, right? And then maybe if anybody wants to share. So
I can go first.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think, I don't know if this is like, I guess, I'm just going to say it and then you can help me word how it sounds. But I like a company that values like a team building environment where it's like a support, like kind of how he was mentioning earlier, how they want you to like get to your personal goals and goals at the company too. So a very like supportive team building type of company.
Awesome. Yeah, so like a company that, do you mean like a company that helps people become a stronger team? Or, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
Very cool. Yeah, so that's a value that you know is important to you in a company. So to sort of tie this into like, what can you do actionably about that? When you're looking at companies and you're going through the interview process, it's not just a company interviewing you, it's also you interviewing a company a bit and getting to learn more about them. So my next statement off of that is like, think about ways you can look out for these values and what questions can you ask during the process to understand if they have these values as well. Yeah. Does anyone else want to share a value that's important to them in a company?
I just want to add, I think like I value a company that doesn't, like, especially with what I was saying before, like asking a question about code review, having a company that supports you if they find mistakes, or like if there's a bug found in your code, they don't try to like retroactively go back into the repository and find like out who made that bug and punish that person. So I feel like that's very important, for like me choosing a company to work for.
Absolutely. Oh my God, you reminded me of my first internship. Anytime anyone made a mistake, it would be like passing the blame. So it would always end up on me because I was the intern. So I remember after that like experience, I was just like, never again am I working in an environment where instead of letting things go, people always need to find somebody to blame. So I totally feel you with that one. And yeah.
I was just going to say something that I value in a company is a company that values all of their team members. And especially I think like when looking for co-ops, like finding a company that's going to care about their interns and co-ops in the same way they care about their normal employees and still try to make like them feel welcome.
Absolutely. Yeah. And again, with that, I would say, definitely think about what's a question you can ask in the interview process to gauge that. So maybe something like, how do you ensure that your co-op is a part of the team, or anything that sort of gets to that value of yours and sort of seeing how they respond to it. And I always like to say, like, as recruiters, we get so many questions every day. So they should have an answer. So if they can't figure out how to respond to the question, usually that can be a moment of like, ooh, I don't think they have a response, which can be like, uh-oh. Yes, go ahead.
I don't know if we have time, but like I have one more little question.
Yes.
Or I guess it's like a value and a question, more of a question of like how to handle a situation like that. But I feel like this is something a lot of people of color experience, where the company is trying to meet like a quota for,
yes,
these are like the diversity hires we're getting for this quarter. So how can you like gauge whether that's what's important to a company, and then like how do you handle that as like a person who feels like, oh, you could be a diversity hire?
Yeah, so one of the main ways, I think one way that you can sort of get past that is like, because it's one thing to ask like, oh, is diversity and inclusion important to you? And everyone's going to say yes, of course it's important to us. And especially recruiters, like recruiters do look at their candidates and look at the people they're hiring and think about like, is this a diverse slate of people? But I think what's really telling is a few things. So, and anyone can add in here if they have any other ideas as well. But a few things I've heard can be good indicators of like really caring about diversity and inclusion in a culture is one, looking at the diversity of the managers. So are most of the people of color in the company located at the bottom of the company? Are they individual contributors? Are they not getting promoted, essentially? Or are they coming in and leaving in like 6 months or in a year? So a great way to see that is sort of looking up, like, what do the managers look like? What does senior leadership look like? Also, I think another great thing to ask is about things like mentorship. I think a lot of companies are getting on this now, but like, for example, at HubSpot, our POCA program has a people of color mentorship program. So these are mentorships where people of color at HubSpot get matched to director level people or above. And these people are your mentors, right? So what does that say? Like, they're willing to put the time into helping people of color grow. And companies don't want to put that time in unless they want you to be able to grow with the company and become senior level employees at the company. So I think that's a great one to look into as well, is like mentorship programs, and looking into like, do they have one specifically for people of color or Black and Indigenous people of color? Like, do they have this built out to really target these groups that tend to be underrepresented and tend to maybe not have gotten as much mentorship in their life? Maybe they, especially if they're like a first gen in tech, and you know, you might not have parents who were in tech, or maybe you just came to the US, like your first gen in the US, like, who was your mentor going to be? You weren't raised in like a tech environment. So it's a great way to match people with mentors. Any other ideas for ways anyone else has heard anything that's like great programs that have stood out to them?
Well, I have an idea for a question you can ask like a company when you're interviewing. I know, like you mentioned that HubSpot has a bunch of different like communities of people. A good question to ask if those like communities of people have like events for other people in the company, so like they could teach like other people in the company about like their culture, like their kind of what they value.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's a really good one because especially to see like, is the company celebrating like other, also things like, I think about things like holiday celebrations, like how is the company celebrating holidays? Are they offering alternatives to like, you know, general, are they doing like a general winter holiday party, or are they using the term like Christmas party for everything? And you're just like, what if I don't celebrate Christmas? And they're like, oh, you can still come. And you're like, wow, thanks. I think like things like that are really cool. That's a great one. Any other questions people can think of that you think would be a great way to get at some of those values?
I think
the one you mentioned, sorry, but like I think the one you mentioned about like looking at where the people of color are at the company was like a really good one.
And then I think Chloe, you were going to say something.
Oh yeah, I think we're approaching 7 o'clock.
Oh yeah.
And I think that I just would like to like show a few like concluding slides. Thank you so much, Glory, for coming, like talking about HubSpot, D&I, and also Marco for coming to talk about kind of what he does.
Of course, yeah. And let me see. Also, one quick thing. I'll drop my email in the chat. If anyone just wants to email me either with more questions or just wants to stay in touch, you can always feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn as well. So let me just drop my info there.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. Also, if you haven't filled out the registration form, we can send you all the emails from the form. So if we can go back to that towards the end and you can like wait, then if you want to put your email in so we can send them to Glory.
And then, so next week, we're talking with Datadog about like the virtual experience with like virtual recruitment, virtual interviews, and like experience working from home.
So this is our collaboration with, sorry, Glory, how do you say his name? Like the engineer that was just presenting?
Oh, Mukul.
He was just mentioning how important hackathons are. So Multi is doing a collab with Hack Beanpot next week on Thursday from 6:30 to 7:30 p.m. We are showcasing different people at different levels of, we're showcasing people at different levels of tech in their life, and then how they've been dealing with imposter syndrome and how they've dealt with it and like tips and advice they have going forward. So stop by if you can make it. The QR code is just sign up, and then I'm dropping the Facebook event in the chat as well if you want to sign up for that. And then the next, so thank you guys for coming. Here is the feedback form. We'd love to hear how you thought this event was. Thank you. I thought it was amazing. Thank you so much, Glory, for coming and putting on this great event. You can either click or go over to the Bitly link or use the QR code to fill that out. And feel free to stick around if you have any questions for Glory or us. You can just throw them in now, unmute yourself, or drop them in chat. Thank you guys for coming. Have a good night.